I have been to a lot of meetings in my life. 31 years as a civil engineer for Cuyahoga County will do that to a person. Budget meetings, zoning hearings, contractor disputes, the kind of rooms where nobody agrees and everyone is certain they're right, and the job is to find the load-bearing truth underneath all of it and build on that. I have sat across from mayors and attorneys and union stewards and very angry homeowners, and I have not raised my voice in a professional setting since 1998, when a subcontractor tried to bill me for work that failed inspection 3 times. I mention all of this because when Renee looked across my kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in April and said, "Frank, we're having you declared legally incompetent, and it's already in motion," I did not raise my voice. I smiled. I said, "Before you file that, there's something you should probably know. I've already spoken to a judge about this situation. He's an old friend. Would you like his number?" Renee's face did something I have been an engineer long enough to recognize. It was the face of a load-bearing wall that has just been informed it is not, in fact, load-bearing. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Frank Darden. I am 58 years old. I spent 31 years designing drainage systems and road infrastructure and bridge supports for Cuyahoga County, Ohio, which means I spent 31 years making sure that things which were supposed to hold weight actually held it, which turns out to be excellent preparation for the last 2 years of my life. My wife Barbara died 26 months ago. Cardiac arrest. She was 55. She had been healthy, active, the kind of woman who made her own bread on Sunday mornings and walked 3 miles before most people had opened their eyes, and then she was gone in the specific, terrible way that cardiac arrest takes people, which is to say without warning and without the chance to say the things you would have said if you had known you needed to say them. I have thought about that a great deal, what I would have said. I have concluded that the most important thing I would have said is something she already knew, which is that she was the foundation of everything I built, and foundations do not announce themselves. They simply hold, and you only understand what they were when they are gone, and the structure settles, and you feel in your bones what used to be there. Barbara is the reason I got through the last 2 years with my assets intact, my mind intact, and my name on everything that has my name on it. Not because she was here, because of what she taught me while she was. Barbara Darden, née Kowalski, was an accountant for 27 years at a regional firm in Cleveland. She worked in estate and trust accounting, which means she spent her professional life inside other families' financial arrangements, and she saw the full spectrum of what people do to each other when money and grief and family obligation get tangled up together. She came home from work with stories that she told me at the kitchen table over dinner, anonymized and professional, but specific enough that I understood what she was describing, and the pattern in those stories, the thing that appeared over and over with a regularity that Barbara eventually stopped finding surprising, was this. The person at the center of the financial disaster almost always trusted someone they should have verified. She said it once, near the end of her career, not about any specific case. She said, "Frank, the saddest thing I see in this job is not people who were cheated by strangers. It is people who were organized in every part of their life, except the part where they assumed the people who loved them were looking out for them." I thought about that sentence a great deal in the months after she died. I thought about it especially in October, when I first understood what was being built around me, and I made a decision that Barbara would have made, which was to stop assuming and start verifying. Barbara is the reason I called Harold in February instead of March. She is the reason I had the file ready when I arrived at his kitchen table on that Saturday. She is the reason the deed is in the folder, the mortgage satisfaction is next to the deed, the retirement account statements are organized by year going back to 1994, and every document of significance in my life is labeled and accessible in under 2 minutes. She set up that filing system in 2008. She updated it every January. I have maintained it in exactly the condition she left it because some things you do not reorganize. She is also the reason that when I finally had the conversation with Renee on that Tuesday in April, I was not the man Renee had been planning for. She had been planning for a man who did not know what he had, who had let his affairs become complicated by grief, who could be gently steered. Barbara spent 27 years making sure I was never that man. My son Michael is 34 years old. He is a project manager at a construction firm in Cleveland, a job he is genuinely good at. And he has my eyes and Barbara's patience, which means he got the better of the arrangement. He has been married to Renee for 5 years. Renee is 32, works in corporate HR, and has a talent for organizational thinking that I noticed from the beginning and that I initially considered a strength. I reconsidered that assessment over time. The first year of their marriage, I had no complaints. Renee was pleasant, organized, the kind of person who sends thank you notes and remembers dietary preferences and manages logistics with the efficiency of someone who does it professionally, because she does. She called me Frank from the first dinner, which I had asked her to, and she included me in conversations rather than around them, and I thought, Michael has done well. Barbara died in the second year of their marriage. I am going to be precise about what changed after Barbara died, because precision matters. The changes were not immediate. That is the first thing to understand. Immediate changes are visible. What happened was gradual, which is the pattern of something that is designed rather than spontaneous. In the first 3 months, I noticed nothing except grief and the particular muted quality of a house where one person used to be and is no longer. In months 4 and 5, I noticed that Renee was asking questions about the house more frequently. Not aggressive questions, curious ones. How long had I owned it? Had I thought about the property taxes relative to the square footage? Did I find it difficult to maintain a loan? Practical questions with reasonable surfaces and a direction underneath them. Month 6, the word burden appeared. Managing this house must be a burden. Month 8, the word complicated appeared in relation to my finances. Managing things alone after a loss is complicated, Frank. Month 10. Renee mentioned, in passing, that a colleague of hers had gone through something similar with her father and had found it very helpful to set up a family trust structure that let everyone work together to support him. Everyone working together to support him. I filed that phrase in the place where I file things I am not done thinking about. I want to tell you about October, because October is when the preparation began, and the preparation is the whole story underneath the story. I woke up on an October morning, made coffee, sat at Barbara's kitchen table, and I made a list. Not a dramatic list, just a list on the yellow legal pad I keep in the kitchen drawer, The way Barbara kept a yellow legal pad in the kitchen drawer for 30 years because some habits are worth inheriting. I wrote down every interaction with Renee that had given me the hum. The word burden in month 6. The word complicated in month 8. The family trust in month 10. The questions about the house. The questions about what I found difficult. The small, consistent redirections of conversation toward the topic of my capacity to manage things. When I read the list back to myself that October morning, it covered most of a page. Then I wrote a second list, everything I actually had. The house, paid off. The county pension, which I had paid into for 31 years and which was fully vested and not subject to any legal instrument another party could affect. The retirement accounts, which were titled in my name only. No joint holders, no secondary signatories. The deed to the house, which I had confirmed, was cleaned by calling the county recorder's office, because I am a county employee of 31 years and I know every department in that building, and the woman who runs the recorder's office has known me since 2003. I looked at the two lists. The first list was a pattern. The second list was a foundation. What I did in October and November was make sure the foundation was exactly what I thought it was. I confirmed every document. I confirmed every account. I had a conversation with Patricia Chu, my attorney, that I framed as an annual review, which it was, but which was also an opportunity to confirm that nothing in my estate documents had any ambiguity that could be exploited, and to update the power of attorney designation to Harold, which Patricia had been suggesting I do since Barbara died, and which I had been meaning to get to. I got to it in November. By December, I had the foundation confirmed, documented, and filed. By January, I had Carl's information from the hardware store. By February, I was at Harold's kitchen table. I want to be precise about what those 4 months felt like, because I think people imagine this kind of preparation as anxious or fearful, and it was neither. It was focused. It was the same feeling I had for 31 years when I was given a project with parameters I did not yet fully understand. You do not panic when you do not have all the information. You gather the information. You build on what you can confirm. You leave nothing to assumption that can be verified, and you do not move until you know what you are building on. Barbara would have said I was describing her filing system. She would not have been wrong. That she did not volunteer, and that I found out through the kind of patient, unhurried research that people who have spent 30 years navigating county bureaucracy get good at. Renee's father is a man named Douglas Holt, 66, who lives in Akron and who has been in financial difficulty for most of the last decade. I found this through public records, through the kind of document trail that exists when someone has had a lien filed or a judgment entered, which Douglas Holt has had both. The lien was for unpaid contractor work on a rental property in 2018. The judgment was a credit matter in 2020. Neither of these things is disqualifying in a daughter-in-law. People have difficult financial histories, and their children are not responsible for them. What matters is the pattern. What matters is that Renee had a father in financial difficulty and a father-in-law with a paid-off house, a county pension, 31 years of retirement savings, and nobody else in his corner. I want to be fair to Renee. I have tried to be fair to her throughout this entire thing because fairness is what engineers do with data. Here is what I think is true. She is not purely mercenary. I think she genuinely believes that I am aging, that I am alone, that I am a burden to my son in ways Michael does not admit, and that the solution she has been building toward addresses a real problem, which is that she and Michael are worried and feel helpless. I think she has told herself the story of this situation, and in that story, she is the person who is doing what nobody else is willing to do. I think she has told herself that story so many times that the part where she and her family benefit financially from the outcome has become part of the story rather than the point of it. That does not make what she tried to do acceptable. It just makes her a complicated person rather than a simple villain, which is almost always more accurate and also, I have found, more useful to understand. I found out what was actually being planned in February. My neighbor, Carl Ostrowski, is 64, retired firefighter, has lived 3 houses down for 18 years. Carl and Barbara and I used to spend Saturday evenings on our respective porches calling commentary across the fence, which is the kind of neighborly arrangement that sounds trivial and turns out to be one of the structural elements of a life that you do not notice until it is under stress. Carl called me on a Thursday in February and said, "Frank, I need to tell you something." He had run into Michael at the hardware store. They had talked briefly, the way neighbors' children talk when they know each other from a distance but are not close. Michael had said something, Carl said carefully, that he thought I should know. He had said that the family was working on getting some protective arrangements in place for Frank, legal arrangements, and that it was being handled by an attorney. Carl said, "Frank, he looked uncomfortable when he said it, like he was saying something he'd been told to say and didn't feel good about." I said, "Carl, what kind of protective arrangements?" Carl said he didn't specify. He said he looked like he wanted to say more but stopped himself. I thanked Carl. I went inside. I sat at the kitchen table where Barbara used to drink her coffee on Sunday mornings with the newspaper, and I thought about protective arrangements and a son who looked uncomfortable and an attorney who was apparently already involved. I called Harold Whitfield that same Thursday evening. Harold Whitfield is 62 years old. He served as a Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court judge for 16 years, family division, before retiring 2 years ago and transitioning into private consulting work on elder law and guardianship matters, which is one of those career transitions that feels inevitable in retrospect when you understand what he saw in 16 years on the family court bench. Harold and I have been friends since 1986, when he moved into the house next to mine in Lakewood, and we discovered we were both engineers. He had an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering before law school, and both the kind of people who would rather fix a thing than replace it. We have had dinner together roughly once a month for 37 years. We played poker on the third Friday of every month for 22 years, until Harold's back made the chair unbearable. He gave a toast at my wedding. He sat in the second row at Barbara's funeral, and I knew he was there without looking, because I knew the specific quality of Harold's stillness in a room. I called him on a Thursday in February, and I said, "Harold, I have a situation and I need to understand what I'm looking at." He listened without interrupting for 12 minutes, which I know because I was watching the clock the way I watch clocks. Then he said, "Frank, talk me through your documentation." I said, "What documentation do you need?" He said, "Everything. Your estate documents, the deed, your medical records, any written record of the conversations you've described." I said, "How much time do you need?" He said, Bring it Saturday. I brought it Saturday. Harold spent 3 hours going through everything at his kitchen table with the reading glasses he has refused to upgrade for 6 years and the yellow legal pad he uses for everything, and when he finished, he said, "Frank, whoever they've retained, I know what they're planning to do, and I can tell you with reasonable confidence that they are going to have a problem." I said, "What kind of problem?" He said, "You are 58 years old with no documented cognitive issues, a 31-year professional record of complex technical decision-making, and estate documents that are current, coherent, and clearly executed. A competency petition requires demonstrating that a person lacks the capacity to manage their affairs." He stopped. He looked at me over his glasses. He said, "You are the most organized person I have known for 37 years. I said, "Barbara trained me." He said, "Yes, she did." He paused. He said, "Frank, here is what I want you to do." He told me. I did it. I spent March doing 2 things that Harold had specified, and 1 thing I decided on my own. The first thing Harold specified, a formal cognitive assessment from my physician, Dr. Anita Reyes, who has been my doctor for 9 years and who conducted the assessment with the slightly exasperated efficiency of a woman who found the request both medically straightforward and professionally insulting on my behalf. She said, "Frank, you are going to score very well on this." I said, "I know." She said, "That is itself a data point." She documented everything. I received the written results within a week. The second thing Harold specified, a formal review of my estate documents with my attorney, Patricia Chu, who has handled my legal work since 2009 and who spent 2 hours going through every document, confirming execution dates, confirming the absence of any instrument that would allow a third party to challenge my decision-making capacity, and confirming that my current power of attorney named Harold Whitfield as my agent, a designation I had made 18 months earlier when Barbara died, and I had updated my documents, and Harold had agreed to serve. Renee did not know about the power of attorney designation. She was about to find out. The third thing, the one I decided myself, I told Michael. Not everything. I told him enough. I called him on a Sunday in late March, the same day I always call him, and I said, "Michael, I know something is being planned." I said it quietly, without accusation, because Michael is not the engineer of this situation, and I have known him for 34 years, and I know the difference between a man who is directing something and a man who has been brought along. I said, "I need you to know that I am aware that I have been preparing and that what happens next does not have to become something that cannot be undone." He was very quiet. He said, "Dad, she's worried about you." I said, "I know she is. I think that's real. I also think there are other things in this situation, and I think you know that too." He said nothing for a long moment. I said, "Michael, I want you to do one thing. When the time comes, I want you to be in the room." He said, "What room?" I said, "The next room where this becomes a direct conversation. I want you there." He said, "Okay." He said it in the voice he has had since he was 9 years old, when he agreed to something that he did not fully understand but trusted me about. I recognized it. Some voices do not change. The Tuesday in April arrived the way these things arrive, with the ordinary surface of a dinner invitation. Renee called on Monday and said they wanted to come over for dinner, just the 3 of them, catch up. I said fine. I made the chicken thing that Michael has liked since he was a teenager, the one with the lemon and the capers that Barbara taught me when we were first married. I set the table. I put on the kettle. They arrived at 6:30. Michael was quiet in the car ride way that people are quiet when they are bracing for something. Renee was organized in her manner, carrying the conversation through dinner with the practiced ease of someone who has decided on the order of events and is managing the time until the moment arrives. The moment arrived after dinner, when the plates were cleared and the coffee was poured, and Renee set down her cup and looked at me with the expression of someone who has prepared to deliver difficult news with compassion. She said, "Frank, there's something Michael and I need to tell you, something we've been working on because we're worried about you and we want to make sure you're protected." I said, "All right." She said, "We've consulted with an attorney. We've been documenting some concerns over the past several months." She said, "Frank, we're going to pursue a legal competency evaluation. It's already in motion. We wanted to tell you directly because you deserve to know, and we want you to understand this is coming from a place of love." I looked at Michael. He was looking at the table. I looked at Renee. She was looking at me with the expression still in place, compassion and gravity, and the slight forward lean of a person who has finished delivering the difficult thing and is now waiting for the response. I want to tell you about the moment that followed because I have turned it over many times since, and I think it contains something worth understanding. I was not angry. I have said this before about other moments in this story, and I want to keep being precise about it, because the word angry would suggest that what I felt was hot, reactive, caught off guard. What I felt in that moment at my kitchen table over coffee that had been Barbara's favorite blend was something I could only describe as the specific calm of a man who has been standing on solid ground and watching someone else build a structure on air and has been waiting a specific number of months for the moment when the structure's architect discovered the ground was not where they thought. I smiled. I said, "Before you file that, there's something you should probably know." She said, "Frank." I said, "I've already spoken to a judge about this situation. He's an old friend. We've been friends for 37 years. He reviewed my documentation in February, and he's been aware of this situation for 2 months. Would you like his number?" Silence. The specific silence of a Tuesday kitchen in April, where the coffee is getting cold and a plan that has been in motion for several months has just been informed that the terrain it was crossing is not what the map said. Renee said, "You spoke to a judge." I said, "Harold Whitfield. Retired common pleas, family division, 16 years on the bench, specializing in exactly this category of legal proceeding. He currently consults on elder law and guardianship matters. He is also, since Barbara died, my designated power of attorney agent. That designation is on file with Patricia Chu's office and has been since 18 months ago." More silence. I said, "Harold reviewed the cognitive assessment Dr. Reyes conducted in March. He reviewed my estate documents. He reviewed 31 years of professional performance records which Patricia pulled from county archives. He has also, and I want to be precise here, reviewed the public record of your father Douglas Holt's financial situation, which is a matter of public record, and which he found relevant context for understanding the shape of what has been being planned here." Renee's face. "I have been an engineer for 31 years. I know what a structure looks like when the key element has been removed." Michael looked up from the table. He looked at Renee. Then he looked at me. He had the expression of a man who asked to be in the room and is now in the room and is understanding why I had asked him to be. He said, "Dad." I said, "I know, son." He said, "How long have you known?" I said, "I suspected in October. I was certain by February." He said, "And you didn't say anything?" I said, "I wanted to be sure. And I wanted to have everything in order before I said anything. I am an engineer. You do not start work until you know what you're building on." Renee said, "Frank, I want you to understand that this was not about your father's finances." I looked at her. She said, "I know how it looks. I know what you just said about Douglas, but that is not why." I said, "Renee, I have tried to be fair to you throughout all of this, and I am going to continue to be fair to you now. I do not know with certainty what the primary reason was. I am not inside your head. What I know is what the actions were and what the actions would have produced if they had succeeded, which was legal control of my affairs passing out of my hands. And I know that this house has been paid off for 9 years, and my retirement accounts are fully funded, and my pension is solid, and I know that your father has had financial difficulty, and I know that you are his daughter who loves him, and I think you can understand why. With that information, I was not in a position to simply wait and see what happened." Michael said, "Renee." She looked at him. He said, "I told you this was the wrong way." He said it quietly, not accusingly. "The way you say something you have said before, in private, and are now saying in a room where the saying of it is different." She said, "Michael." He said, "I told you in January this was the wrong way." He looked at me. He said, "Dad, I told her we should just talk to you." He said, "I should have done that myself, and I didn't, and I'm sorry." I said, "Michael, I know." He said, "I let it go too far." I said, "It didn't go anywhere that can't be walked back." That is the important thing. We sat at the table for a while after that. The coffee was cold. I made fresh coffee because that is what you do at 9 in the evening when a difficult thing has resolved and everyone in the room needs a moment to find the new shape of things. I made it in Barbara's percolator, the one she refused to replace with a drip machine, because she said the drip machines made everything taste like water that had been near coffee once and then moved on. Michael helped me with the cups the way he used to help in the kitchen when he was 12, standing next to me at the counter, not talking, just present. I thought about Barbara in those years, standing on his other side, making something that smelled like warmth. I thought about what she would have said about this evening. She would have said, "Frank, you waited too long to make the coffee." She would have been right. Here's what happened after April. Harold Whitfield called the attorney Renee had retained, a woman named Diane Forsythe, whose practice dealt in elder law and who Harold knew professionally from his years on the bench. He described the call to me as collegial and brief. He said he had outlined the documentation in my file and that Ms. Forsythe had asked several clarifying questions and that at the end of the call she had indicated that her client was reconsidering the matter. He said he did not need to say anything that was not already in the record. The record was sufficient. I never heard from Diane Forsythe directly. The competency petition was not filed. Michael came to see me alone the following Saturday. He brought coffee from the place on Clifton that Barbara used to like. He sat at the kitchen table, and we talked for 2 hours, which is the longest uninterrupted conversation we have had in 3 years. He talked about the marriage, about the pressure of the last 2 years, about the specific difficulty of being the person in the middle of a situation where 2 people you love are in conflict, and you have not been honest with either of them about what you actually think. He said, "I should have called you in October." I said, "Yes." He said, I knew it didn't feel right. I said, I know you did. That is why I asked you to be in the room. I needed you to see it clearly, and I needed you to see that I had seen it clearly. Those are two different things, and both of them mattered. He said, Are you okay, Dad? Not about this. Generally, I said, I am 58 years old. I have a pension, a paid-off house, a doctor who is insulted on my behalf, a lawyer who knows every document I have ever signed, and Harold Whitfield, who has been my friend for 37 years and who has seen more guardianship fraud cases from a judicial bench than I care to think about. I am considerably better than okay. He said, I know you are. I think I forgot that for a while. I said, That's all right. Now you remember. We had dinner. He stayed until 9. He called when he got home, the way Barbara used to make him call when he was 17 and driving himself for the first time, and I said good night the way I said it then, which is to say with the specific relief of a parent whose child has arrived somewhere safely. I still sit at the kitchen table every morning with Barbara's percolator and the newspaper that I still have delivered in print because I am 58 years old and I read a physical newspaper, and I am not going to apologize for it. The house is in my name. The deed is in the file. The power of attorney designates Harold Whitfield, who has been my friend since 1986, and who has a yellow legal pad with my documentation on it that I sincerely hope he never needs to use. Harold and I had dinner last month. He ordered the salmon. I ordered the steak because Barbara is not here to suggest the salmon, and I am allowed to order what I want. We talked about the situation in the past tense, which is my favorite tense for difficult things, and at the end of the evening, Harold said, Frank, I want to say one thing about all of this. I said, Say it. He said, You called me in February. You had everything organized by March. You had been watching since October. He stopped. He said, In 16 years on the family court bench, I saw hundreds of these situations. You know what most of them had in common? I said, What? He said, The person at the center of it didn't know it was coming until it was already done. He looked at me. He said, How did you know? I said, Harold, I spent 31 years as a civil engineer. I know what a current running where it shouldn't sounds like. I know the hum behind the wall before the wall shows you the stain. He nodded. He said, Barbara would have called it in September. I said, I know. She was always about 3 months ahead of me. He smiled. He said, She was ahead of most people. I said, She was the foundation. He said, Yes. We paid the check. We walked out into a Cleveland evening in May that had the particular quality of evenings in May in that city, cool and clear and smelling like the lake. Harold's car was parked 2 spaces from mine. We shook hands at the parking lot the way we have shaken hands at the end of 37 years of evenings. He said, Frank, call me if anything changes. I said, Harold, you'll hear from me before it changes. That's the point. He said, That is exactly the point. I drove home. The kitchen light was on the way I always leave it. The percolator was on the counter where it always is. Barbara's recipe box was next to it. The index cards in the order she left them. The chicken with the lemon and the capers on a card near the front. Because Michael has always liked it. And Barbara knew that and organized accordingly. I am 58 years old. I know what I have. I know where every wire runs. And I have a friend who spent 16 years on a family court bench who would like to see someone try. My father was a structural engineer. He used to say that the most important thing in any structure was not the strongest element. It was the element that knew its job and did it without announcing itself. He said, "Frank, a bridge is not the cables. It is not the deck. It is the connection between them that nobody notices, because it never fails. Harold Whitfield is the connection. I am the bridge. Nobody is going anywhere.